Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the Pathways Workshop Series, Session 3, Future Careers in Aerospace. I am James Causey, Executive Director of the Global Spaceport Alliance. And everyone on this call, I believe, is completely supportive of the evolution of commercial space. But to see its growth the way we really want it, there was a missing element back in 2015 that would help with its growth, and that was the development of a network of spaceports, not just within the United States, but across the world. So in 2015, we created the Global Spaceport Alliance. Now, within spaceports, there's no one size that fits all. Each one is completely different and offers an array of different job opportunities at the particular location. So my hope today, our hope today, I should say, is that we're going to surprise you with the array of opportunities that exist that are not just technical knowledge of space. Let me just take a moment to show you the panelists that we have for today's discussion. We have Joe Bullington, Christina Korp, Laura Forsick, Liz Kennick, and they will be introduced to you momentarily. But let me just also give you a little background on GSA, the Global Spaceport Alliance. So as I inferred, commercial space growth is going to be a function, ultimately, of having a network of spaceports worldwide. So that is the primary vision for GSA. Each one being different, but as time moves forward, offering to all users the availability for ready access to space. Now, we're actually very proud of the growth that we've had in GSA. It's a small community, really. We have 26 current members of spaceports. And if you eliminate Russia and China and North Korea, there's really only 45 to 50 realistic opportunities that are at various stages of development worldwide. We also have associate members, basically companies supplying services to spaceports, and nonprofit or government members. So we have a total of 52 members. As students on this call, we'd really encourage you to consider joining the Global Spaceport Alliance, and perhaps even your university have them join as well. If you decide that you want to join GSA, if you go to the next slide, Steve, please feel free to contact either myself, James Causey, or Deputy Director Steve Wolf at the globalspaceportalliance.com. We want this to be as interactive a discussion as possible, so please feel free to use the chat function to ask any questions you have at any time during the course of the session. We're very proud of the support that we've got for this session. We've had Spaceport America is doing it with us, and also Jacobs is operating as a sponsor. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Alice Carruth, who as of Friday is no longer with Spaceport America, but still wanted to participate in this session. So Alice, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, James. Yes, I've been the Public Information Officer for Spaceport America for the last 3 years, and we're really supportive of this Pathways series as part of our outreach program that we do at the Spaceport and as part of the Spaceport America Cup. And I know most of you have probably heard of the Cup, but for those of you who haven't, it is the world's largest intercollegiate rocket engineering competition that we host in New Mexico every June. This year will be June the 19th to the 24th, and we have over 140 teams competing from 20 countries around the world. So it's a completely global event, and really this Pathway series is about connecting you to your local spaceport and to resources so you can have a good career in aerospace coming out of this competition. I believe we've got a couple of little slides about that. So this series is over 4 different episodes. We are currently on the 3rd one, Future Careers in Aerospace. And don't forget that in 2 weeks' time, on April the 24th, we will have How to Build Relationships with Your Local Spaceport. And Scott McLaughlin from Spaceport America will be on that call, along with Melissa Thorpe from Spaceport Cornwall in the UK. So please come and join us and ask us questions about what it is you can do to connect with the spaceports around the world and what resources they can offer to you as somebody who wants to start off as your career in aerospace. These recordings are also available on YouTube, and we'll make sure that they get shared with you regularly on social media platforms, but you can find them on the Spaceport America YouTube channel. So back to that Spaceport America Cup, which is happening June the 19th to 24th. We had 158 teams that were initially accepted. Some of them have pulled out for various reasons. Either they've not met the safety standards so far, or they've had to pull out because of financing, which we completely understand. But we do know that there's over 5,000 students around the world that are continuing to participate in this competition, and about 1,500 of those will make it to New Mexico in June. There will be a live stream of that event, so if you're interested in watching but can't make it to New Mexico June 19th to 24th, do make sure you look up the Experimental Sounding Rocket Association. They will be live streaming this event, and last year we had over 100,000 people watching it when it was going on during the month of June. So with no further ado, I'm going to pass it on to my really good friend Joe Bullington from Jacobs. Joe and I have worked together for several years here in New Mexico, and he recently moved to Alabama, so I'm missing him a lot, but I'm sure he's going to talk you through some really great things about careers in aerospace and how you can get involved.
Thank you, Alice, my good friend. So welcome, everybody. Happy to be here and do this. It's one of the things I love doing. I'm going to moderate this panel. And so I want to remind you, as we've said several times, please, we do really want questions. So please put questions into the chat window. And I'm going to introduce the panelists, but first, just tell a little about myself and my background and how I got to where I am. So from the time I was a small child, I was always interested in science, all aspects of science. Over time, I got particularly interested in electronics and communications and computers and things like that, but also space flight. So fortunately, after I got my degree in electrical engineering, I went to work right away for an aerospace testing facility, Air Force testing facility, and started where I was working on testing of rocket engines and things like missile nose cone materials testing and things like that. And later on, I transferred to a NASA support contract, and that's where I spent most of my career, supporting NASA on-site support contracts, doing things like the instrumentation and control systems for test facilities. And I've worked on a couple of flight projects where we were designing different flight, a satellite or other vehicle. And so I've gotten to do quite a few things. I think that's one thing I want to get across is my career related to aerospace is I've had a number of different kinds of jobs within that over the years. And so we need people with different kinds of experience and skills. The main thing I think you're going to hear from everybody is just the interest. If you're interested in it and passionate about space, you find there's lots of different ways these days to find out more about space flight and space flight careers. So just, use your passion to go find out more and get yourself involved in whatever way you can through things like the rocketry teams, viewing videos like this, any other opportunities you have. If you look around, there's a lot out there. You just may have to look for it a little bit. But I encourage you to do that. We very much need people who are passionate about space, who want to work in the space careers. I will share that my company, Jacobs, who's sponsoring this, just at the place where I work at NASA Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, we have about 100 positions open right now for engineers and other technical people. There's hundreds across my company and thousands across the industry looking for people. And so it's really something that you can definitely have a great chance of finding a job in. There's a huge demand for people, not just engineers and scientists, but people that know business, people that know how to run operations, all kinds of different things. So that's enough, I think, for me. So I want to start through the rest of the panel here. So the next person I want to introduce is Laura Forzik. She's the CEO of Astrolytical. So Laura is the founder and executive director of the space consulting firm Astrolytical, guiding business and government entities to grow in the space sector. She is also a space career coach, helping individuals pursue and advance in space careers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura.
Hello, thank you, Joe. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to GSA. So I don't want to bore you, so I'm going to be really super quick. I started out as a scientist. I knew from a young age that I loved science, I loved physics. And then when I got to undergrad, I went to school at Florida Institute of Technology, which is right near Kennedy Space Center, and I wanted to intern there. And I was told that you had to be an engineer to intern at KSC, which of course was not true. And it's certainly not true today, where NASA takes all kinds of interns. But as a freshman in college, I didn't know any better. So I really thought that I, was stuck where I really wanted to work at NASA. That was my dream. But I also really liked being a scientist, and I didn't really want to switch to engineering. So what I did instead was I took the route of looking at data from space telescopes. And that was pretty cool. I studied all kinds of things from two stars that eat each other to exploding stars, most exploding energetic things that we know of in the universe. And that was awesome. But it wasn't until graduate school that I realized that there is a diversity of career paths out there. And the people that you talk to in universities, your professors, they don't necessarily know. It's not like malicious. They just don't know all the opportunities out there. And so they tend to direct students towards what they do know, which is professorships or, the more typical mechanical aerospace engineering kind of roles, when it's really, really very diverse. In graduate school, I got interested in the business side of space. I got interested in the policy side of space. And I realized that as a scientist, I had a really good foundation to go into anything I wanted. And space was always the goal. It was just, where do I fit in space, right? And for you who that launch rockets, it might be that you want to launch rockets, or maybe not. Maybe you have some other interest in space. So for me, my 20s were really an entire decade of trying to figure out where I truly wanted to be. And so I did work on spaceports. I worked on a startup that wanted to do point-to-point suborbital transportation that, the startup failed. That happens. I worked with the International Space Station, helping to get payloads, scientific technology development paid up to the space station, and help coordinate that with the scientists and engineers on the ground, and really get the ISS introduced to people who had no idea that space is happening. Because you might know, and your friends might know, but chances are most people in your circle, your friends and family outside of the space arena, they don't know that all this stuff is possible. So I was telling people, yeah, it's possible to do research in space. It's possible to do all these things on the International Space Station. And here's how. So that was one of my early roles. And that introduced me to multidisciplinary research, where I was a physicist, but it was a tiny team of like 3 of us that expanded to 4 of us when I was there. So I was the only physicist, and the other 2 were biological scientists. So I had to learn all the things about the biology and the remote sensing and all these other aspects of doing research in space that I didn't know about. And then once the company that I worked for to do point-to-point suborbital transportation, once that company failed, I started my own company. And you might notice I have no no business background. I don't have an MBA. So I had to make it up. I really did not know what I was doing as a scientist trying to figure out how to be a small business owner. But that's the beauty of learning as you go, right? You get mentors who can teach you things. You can teach yourself based on the vast resources that are out there. If I wanted to, I could have gone back for an MBA, but I didn't. But you can do anything. Your degree or degrees, in my case, I have a master's and I'm ABD on 2 doctorates, which means I didn't actually finish them. But you can do anything. So I was doing things like going to the Hill and talking to Congress and talking to universities and figuring out how to do research and, all these kinds of things. I did do several spaceport projects in Florida, in Georgia, and in the Middle East. And so you can really do anything with these foundational degrees that you have because they teach you how to think and they give you that foundation of the technical knowledge, or if you're like communications, the communications knowledge, or if you're marketing, the marketing knowledge, or whatever it happens to be. And you build on that as you go. So I'll let the rest of the panel speak now. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That was great. I can tell that you're passionate about space like the rest of us. I'm going to go, again, we'll do questions at the end. So the next person I'm going to introduce is Liz Kinnick. Liz joined Teachers in Space as program director in 2011 and became president in 2014. Formerly vice president of client technology at Morgan Stanley, she now splits her time between developing exciting ways to bring space into the classroom and funding space plots for classroom experiments and for teachers. So over to you, Liz.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to build on some great things that Laura said. I think much of what she has experienced has been true for me as well. She mentioned sometimes that she was discouraged by people rather than encouraged, told, oh, this isn't right for you, don't do that. And certainly I've experienced that too. And one of the things that I think is so important is that we encourage people to follow what it is they're interested in. Mentorship is so important. I started with a degree in English. I was interested in education, but discovered that I'm really good at technology. I got a certification in network engineering. I got my master's degree in information systems and operations analysis, and then had an 18-year career in systems networking and systems engineering and process engineering. During that time, I got really interested in space. I wanted to go to space. And again, discouragement. Oh, you don't have the right background. You'd have to go back and get another 2 years of pure math, right? All these reasons I couldn't do it. And then I started giving money to the Space Frontier Foundation, and they invited me to their conference. And that was my big eye-opening opportunity, meeting so many people who were either working on space or writing about it. And those people were all encouraging. I could go to a presentation by a guy who had started a small business in Alabama making just specific parts for the new commercial rocket industry. He said, I'm not going to start a big business, but I can start a small business. I can make parts. And he was successful at that. I realized that you could see where there were gaps. You could ask people, what about this? And if you found that people said, you're right, nobody's doing that yet, go ahead and do it. I got invited to take over the Teachers in Space program. That was perfect for me because of my years of project management and my love of space. And I really believe and see that teachers are the people, they're the communicators, they're the ones who will give the encouragement. If we help, Laura mentioned college professors, same thing with teachers. If they know what the career opportunities are, then they can best help to encourage their students. Is this a good time for me to show just a couple slides about Teachers in Space, or should I save that for later?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let's see if I can figure out how to share screen and show slides. All right, is this working? Do we have slides? So
yes, looks good.
Awesome. Okay, so this is just from the past year, some of the things that we have done. We have launched experiments designed by teachers and their students with Blue Origin, and we're going to be doing more of that this year, next year. So those are suborbital experiments from the classroom, going to space and coming back. Last year on a Wednesday morning, I got a phone call from Zero Gravity saying, hey, Can you find us a New York teacher and student to put on a flight out of Newark on Friday? Well, Newark is in another state, and it's actually not easy to get a student under 18 out of state on such short notice. But if you look in the far right corner of this picture, there's a silver-haired man who looks really happy. He's a teacher that I know. He went to his advanced physics teacher, said, who's the best physics student? The girl in the lower left was named. She's in 11th grade. Chris, the teacher, went to her parents' house and said, can I take her on the zero G? And they said yes. And on Friday, they did this. That led to us taking a group of teachers with those classroom experiments again, the same things we fly with Blue, took them on the flight. Now, the students had said to their teachers, make sure you get a picture doing a somersault. Well, the flight had to be cut short, so the teachers went home with their experiments, and we came back a week later. During that week, the students went from wanting a picture of the teacher doing a somersault to having all kinds of real questions about the data that they had already recorded. How come the one in the locker seemed warmer than the ones that were floating around? How come this one has a different light reading than the others? Suddenly, they were totally engaged in how their experiment was working and the data we were getting back. And when we flew the second time and got all 30 parabolas, we got really great data. So we're excited to be doing that, to have our first involvement in human-tended payloads. And we're really looking forward to commercial space stations so that we can do more of that over a longer period of time. On the far right is Firefly. We love them. They do orbital launches. They have given us 2 so far. The first was a test and it lasted 2 minutes before the rocket had to be destroyed. We lost our payload. Beauty of educational payloads is they're generally inexpensive. We were quickly able to build another. They got that successfully to orbit last year, October 1st, and it stayed up for a week, and we got data back. They have now suggested that we apply to NASA CubeSat Launch Initiative. We were accepted, and our third orbital satellite will go up with Firefly this summer, and that one should stay up for a couple years. Public can use it. It says on our website, TIS.org, how to work with that satellite. So other cool stuff that's happening, and I'm unable apparently to switch my slides. I don't know why. So maybe we'll just stop with that one. But yeah, what I wanted to say is that the more I work with teachers and see how their work influences their students, whether we're launching things on balloons, sending them to space, and we just got invited to submit for a lunar payload. I put that proposal in on Thursday. We'll hear in 2 weeks whether we get to send something to lunar orbit. That'll be with Firefly again in 2 years. Can't stop, right? And we find the amount of science that can be done, the amount of support that's needed on Earth to make these launches happen, to prepare experiments, to integrate payloads, the logistics involved, and the need for spaceports all over so that we're not all trying to get to California for a single flight that happens once a year. This stuff needs to be happening regularly. It needs to be available. And I wish that everybody would join us and work in education in space.
That's great. Can you stop sharing, Alice?
Yes.
I mean, Liz?
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you, Liz. That was great. I'm glad you were able to do your slides. I was ready, but you did a good job. Okay, so the next panelist I want to introduce is Christina Korp. She's known as the Astronaut Wrangler. She's an astronaut manager, space advisor, founder of Space for a Better World, and the president of Purpose Entertainment. Her mission is to connect the space curious to the space serious. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you everyone else for being on here. You know, it's funny because I took the bare minimum of math and science. So when people know this and they find out that I work in space, they're kind of like, what? And I like young people to understand this was not the path for my life. This was not the plan for my life. I was a professional musician and singer, and I grew up in South Dakota as one of 10 children. And I always loved space, but I was not on this pathway of wanting to do science and math and all of that other stuff. I wanted to do music, and I came from a very artistic musical family. My grandmother on my dad's side was always fascinated about astronomy. So I always had that kind of in my life since I was a little kid. And I think that most people have this fascination with the moon and stars, and no matter what your interests are, it's something that we can relate to. So my life was about music, and then I started working with astronauts. I'll show you a couple slides because it doesn't even sound real. A lot of the things that I've gotten to do in my life, it says I can't share. A lot of the things that I have tried to do. Sorry, it just won't let me share. I was going to share some slides, but because I was just going to show a little bit. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Right
So,
now, Christina.
there we go. Okay. I just wanted to show a few slides because my mission, as I say, is connecting the space curious to the space serious. I was a space curious person. I think that most people on Earth are space curious people. And this is what was my life before. I was a professional singer. I had wanted to be a rock star. I ended up becoming a background singer for major Latin artists. I sang on Ringo Starr records. I was hanging out with Aerosmith. I mean, this was my life before, and I wanted to be a rock star. Eventually, though, I went to work behind the scenes and worked for a producer and ran a record label. And then I went to this. I went to work for Buzz Aldrin. I did not know what I was getting myself into, but before I knew it, I was within the world of the Apollo astronauts. And as you can see, I not only entered space at the top, I entered with the rock stars of the astronauts. And I think they needed people like me, though, who really loved space but knew nothing about space. It was a new, fresh perspective on space. And I tried really hard to help Buzz. And that led me to this. My Aim Higher project is something that I'm doing now. You can learn more about it at spaceforabetterworld.com. I did this as a big inspiration project because I think we need to use more art to try to inspire people to come into space. People like me who love art and music, but also love space and are not terribly technical. I think that we have to do that in order to get more people to work in space for all the other jobs that are not technical. And finally, I'm very passionate about women. Here I am with who I call my space sisters, several of the female astronauts, and including Poppy Northcutt, the first woman to work in mission control. I am really passionate about inspiring more women and girls to come into space. So you'll see me doing lots of projects in that realm to try to inspire people. And there's just too much for me to go over in that realm. I'll just close with this. If you want to learn more about what I'm doing with astronauts, what I'm doing with Space for a Better World, and the kind of content I'm trying to do to inspire more people to come into space, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, at Space for a Better World, at SpaceFabWorld, or at xtina_corp. And I'm doing a lot of projects coming up this year. I'm going to be doing a zero gravity flight in June with astronauts Nicole Stott and Doug Hurley. I'll be doing 3 days of events in Romania. And I've heard, by the way, that the Romanian rocket team last year was a winner in in the cup that you have going on at the spaceport in New Mexico. So I'm doing events in Romania, June 11th, 13th, and 14th. I'll be doing some things in the UK. And these are my ways to try to invite people like me, who love space, who are not the scientists and engineers or someone who wants to be an astronaut, although I do want to be an astronaut at some point. But I'm trying to get people like me to find a pathway to space. And I'm living proof that you can take the bare minimum of math and science and work in space, and not only work in space, but work with astronauts. So I'd love to have this conversation continue, and people can reach out to me if they have any questions about all the crazy stuff that I'm doing. But I'm just grateful to be here with you guys today.
Thank you, Christina. That was great. I'm glad you were able to do your slides. So we're going to go here to questions in just a minute, and we'll start preparing for that. But I just listening to you, the rest of you made me think a couple things I wanted to add. So I described a career progression that's pretty much typical of what you think of engineers doing space stuff. But I want to say that my really getting engaged with the new commercial space industry and all the things going on with that happened really by me just getting involved. I was fortunate enough to live for a number of years in Las Cruces, New Mexico, right near Spaceport America. And I just started volunteering to help with events out there and things that were going on, got to know everybody. Alice and myself and a few other people put together a thing called Las Cruces Space Festival. It's a local celebration of space to make the folks aware of what's going on in space in that part of the country. A lot of people don't know. I was a few years ago a founding member of an organization called New Space New Mexico, which aims to grow the space industry in New Mexico. And all that was stuff that was done mostly is not a key part of my job. It was something I did because I was really interested and wanted to, and it's been really rewarding. So the message there is just get involved in whatever events, organizations, anything you can find out about related to space that you can get involved in. They're all over the place, especially with your ability to get online now. And I also want to mention that I really am so pleased to see these different descriptions of the different ways that people have gotten into being involved with space and not just the traditional pretty much path that I took. Okay, so with that, we're ready to take questions. And I believe Alice is going to ask the questions. You ready, Alice?
Yes, I am. I think you've got a first question coming in. I asked the participants, what it is they're interested in, and they've got kind of an array of different things that they're looking at. But the first question is coming from James. He said, as a college aerospace engineering student, I've often heard that it's difficult to get into the space sector. Is there anything you would recommend to get my foot in the door? I think that's a really good question. We want to start off with, maybe we'll go with Liz first, and then we can go through the rest of the panel.
Yeah, so one of the things that has impressed me is students who have written to whoever they want to work for and offered themselves as an intern. Companies are so eager for interns, and there are not enough to go around. I have visited companies who are taking high school interns who are actually working on things and solving problems. I was in Argentina flying experiments with the Perlan project, which is a glider project. There was a college freshman who had written to the CEO of that company and said, please, I love aerospace. I'll do anything. Can I be your intern? They took him. And at the end of the year, he was working for Dennis Tito, who was the primary founder. So it can happen that fast. Internships are a really, really great way to go.
I would also echo what Christina and Joe have said. I did not come into aerospace with a background in engineering or science. I was journalist before I moved to New Mexico, purely by luck, because my husband is an engineer who works at White Sands Missile Range, and found that there was this incredible aerospace industry that nobody was talking about. No one was telling its background and its story, and it sometimes takes somebody who comes from a different background to come in and tell a story in a different way. So I really think exploring different avenues, so I started off volunteering, working with Joe, running the Space Festival, and then found myself with a job given to me working in communications for a payload company. So really, putting yourself out there, networking is a huge way of getting yourself involved. Go and find out about what your local museums are doing and see if maybe you can go and volunteer with them. Go and find out about STEM programs at your local schools to see if you can go and help out with that. I think that's a really good way of starting yourself off and putting yourself out there. Laura, have you got anything you could add to how you think a good starting point is for the industry?
Yeah, I'm glad that people are being enthusiastic about wanting to enter the space industry. I work with people from all backgrounds, and I have to say aerospace engineering is one of the easiest ways to get in. The only easier one would be like software engineering, anything having to do with software programming, coding. But aerospace is like right up there with the easiest major because there's a plethora of engineering jobs, internships, opportunities out there. And I echo what the other two just said, which is be proactive and get yourself out there, whether that's applying for internships, whether that's networking at events, or even just online. It's also things like volunteering for any kind of local organization that's doing something that you want to be part of, like you're doing right now with launching rockets, right? And building up that portfolio as well as building up the connections, that will like really, really help you to get in, because you'll have the hands-on experience and you'll have the people who know who you are and have seen what you've done.
Christina, have you got any events of things that are coming up around the country that perhaps you could suggest to students to come and participate in and meet people at?
Well, before that, here's what I want to say.
Yeah.
When I got the job to work for Buzz Aldrin, everywhere I went, every freaking PhD I met, every person who already worked in space was like, how did you get this job? And I said, I applied to it. And then they would say, wow, I wouldn't have had the guts to do that. So I say this because people don't apply. They self-disqualify themselves. They look at a job posting. They're intimidated by the criteria. And so my advice to you kids, apply for everything you want to try to do, because that's where I think a lot of times young people, we need a lot of people in jobs, and many, many different kinds of jobs. And the other thing I will say is maybe apply for something that maybe out of your direct realm of expertise, but you might have the exact skills that they need. And the other thing that I would say is I met a young lady from Pakistan recently who wants to be an engineer. And then she told me she got offered a position to work in marketing. And I said, take it. And she was like, yeah, but I said, no, buts, take it. Because the people you will meet, the networking you will have in that job, the things you will learn about communicating space is more valuable than you going directly into engineering. Take the doggone job. Do not discount this opportunity, because it will always lead to other things. And you may decide that you actually love it more than what you wanted to do. So, networking, yes, is a huge one. But I do want to say, apply for every job. Don't stop yourself. And that's something I hear mostly from women too. They look, it's that whole thing about I need to fill all the criteria. No, you don't. If you fit all the criteria, you're overqualified. And so apply for everything. And then yes, I do public outreach events trying to connect the space curious to the space serious. So that's, I'm going to do this one in Romania, Space Day Romania on June 11th. At Polytechnica University. And what I'm grateful for that university is that they are excited about my way of trying to get people to come in. Yes, I have astronauts. That's a big advantage. But what we are also trying to do is big space art projects to use space to inspire people. Because that's the other thing, I'm the witness to the moon landing memories. I have heard thousands of moon landing memories from the Apollo era. And every single one of those was somebody who was a kid who watched the footage of rockets lifting off or watched footage of astronauts. It wasn't watching or looking at a math problem. Don't get me wrong. I know some people look at math and they think it's the most exciting thing ever. But in general, in my experience of all the people who basically helped build this space ecosystem, they saw something amazing and it lit a spark within them to want to learn how that thing worked. So yes, this is what I'm trying to do through experiential types of things, big art projects. So June 11th is Space Day Romania. In October, we haven't announced it yet, but we'll have some events in Harwell in the UK as well. There's probably going to be some other things too. I'll be doing Space Camp in the Kolstat in Thailand, Bali, and then with Sarah Sabri in the Maldives this summer. So I'll be putting some of this on the website. It's just not up there yet. But anyway, my number one advice is apply for everything you want to try to go for. Don't discount an opportunity if somebody offers you an in. Just take it. If you hate it, you could quit, but it might lead you to something else that you like even more. You just never know.
I think that's incredible advice. And I certainly echo that. I've certainly had a few people reach out to me recently about positions, and I said, just apply. What's the worst that could happen? Really, you might get rejected. You're better off trying and putting yourself out there than you are not trying and then thinking, I could have maybe done that. So we've got another question that's just come in, which I think would be a really interesting one for Joe to answer. How do you sell yourself when applying for a role in the industry when you don't have any experience? How did you start off when you came in as an aerospace engineer to sell yourself in that position?
Okay, that's a good question. So first of all, I'll say by the time I got my engineering degree, I also had 4 years in the Air Force before that. So I had some applicable experience. But I know I hire a lot of people from fresh outs to people with 20 or 30 years experience. I've hired hundreds of people. So we're actually looking these days, it's getting harder to find the people we need with the experience we need. So what I look for in people that have for a lot of jobs that I have on a NASA contract, we have to have somebody with an engineering degree for some positions, not all of them, but some of them. And even for those positions, if for people right, fresh out of college, what I look for is, did you do something else while you were in college? Were you part of a rocketry team, a robotics team? Did you take a leadership position in one of those things? Not just hung out with the folks while they did it, but you were like one of the leaders of that team. Because typically these things, and I think this is great, rocketry teams, robotics teams, other kinds of things like that. These days, it's a rounded project. It's not just one technical thing you're doing. Somebody has to take care of logistics. Somebody has to plan the project. Somebody has to make sure it stays on track. Somebody takes care of the budget. All those things. You don't have to be an engineer to do all of those things for sure. But if you're applying for engineering and you've done any of those things, that's great. Just do something to show that you are interested, inspired, passionate about the job, and that will go a long way to help you be competitive in getting the job you want, whether it's engineering or if you have a business background or whatever. How's that?
Anyone else got anything to add to that? I think it was definitely a good answer. Yes, Liz.
Yeah, that was oh, sorry.
That's right. Go, Laura.
That was a great answer. I just wanted to add that you have experience, whether it is some kind of extracurricular activity or whether it's a paper or a project you did in your class. Like, you just have to identify those experiences. So you weren't doing nothing for your entire career as a student. You've been doing things. You just need to not discount those things that you've been doing and identify, oh, they're looking for someone who knows how to model or do CAD. Well, I've done that in this class and here and there. You just have to identify it. So yeah, again, what Christina said, don't discount yourself and apply even if you think you don't have experience, because chances are you do. You just need to identify it for yourself and then identify it for the people who are going to be reading your application.
And to add to that, I would like to say, don't be afraid to say, I'm willing to learn. Like, I have had so many of my mentors who recognized that I was willing, and they'd ask me, can you do this? I'm like, no, but can you teach me? Are you willing? I am willing to learn. I am a hard worker. And I think that, even saying that sometimes and letting people know, please teach me, I want to learn, that also gets them to see, okay, here's somebody I could show, I can hand down my knowledge to. And people like to do that too. Liz, you're muted.
Okay, this is a time in a growing industry. It's like when the internet was coming, same thing, right? Not enough people with the experience. And so the two things that build your career and that make you somebody that can be hired for something you haven't done before are your ability to show how you've either done things that haven't been done before or cleaned up a mess, right? Those are the two things. So if you can tell a project that you did in school or at another job where something was not working right and you helped people figure out how to improve it, that'll do it. Or if you saw something that was needed and created that, those are the two things that are really important now.
I certainly drive that home whenever we get STEM tours coming through Spaceport America. Failure is not actually a thing in aerospace. It's a learning opportunity. You don't fail. It's just an opportunity for you to go, okay, that didn't work. How do we approach it differently? So when I see things, particularly rocketry, and it happens professionals and student level, where they blow up on after takeoff, and I often cheer, and they go, why are you cheering? I'm like, well, it's an opportunity for you to learn and grow, isn't it? If it went perfectly to first time round, then you never know what you did right and wrong. You have to almost go back through the analyses again. So it's never a failure. It's always an opportunity. So I think when you come to anything, when it comes to applying for a position, talk about those as well. I think that's a really good opportunity for growth.
Another description of that people have used is failing forward. You fail, something that you tried failed, but you use that to get you to the next step.
I like that one. Failing
And I
forward.
wanted to say, something I think that young people need to, or maybe don't know. When the Apollo missions happened and they sent people to the moon, the average age in mission control was 26. And so it's good for people to know there was a bunch of young people who were part of this and they were just figuring it out. Charlie Duke, 10th man to walk on the moon, he was talking about how they literally, when they failed or they had something go wrong, they would go in a room together with a bunch of the flight directors and leaders and say, anybody got an idea? and someone would say, I think we should try this. And then they would go around the room and say, what do you think? And then they'd say, go, 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 go. And then they would try it. And so, I think that's also another thing is everybody thinks everybody has all the answers. And there's still a lot we're still trying to figure out how to do. So I noticed, people will ask, well, what are the skills I need? And I see that in the chat, and somebody else can probably ask that. But out of the box thinking, trying something new, having a creative mindset is a very valuable thing, not just a technical mindset.
And I'm going to jump on that question, and I'll get to you in a second for that, Joe. That is asking about, what are the valuable skills that people are looking for? Is it more interpersonal skills, communications, or are they looking for just the technical? And I think, Joe, if you want to carry on with that question for me.
Okay. So that's a good one. I like talking about that. So as I mentioned, for some positions, you have to have an engineering degree. For others, you don't. But for any of them, the communication skills, the interaction, the ability to express yourself and show that you can communicate and work with people on a team and lead a team are the things that really get you advanced. I mean, you can be an engineer or a software developer. We all know this. You can go sit in your garage or a cubicle and just spend 12 or 14 hours a day coding or doing whatever. And that's valuable. You might be successful doing that. But when you're going to work for a company and on a team, what we really need is people at, from the very beginning to the up into the supervision and management. But we need people that can interact with each other well, that have good skills, interpersonal skills, and can express themselves, can write clearly, can speak clearly, and communicate well with other people. So those are very valuable skills for anybody in any profession.
I'm going to carry on with that. And they're talking about what opportunities specific to leadership skills are there out there. I think that's a really good question, because I do think you need to think outside the box with that. And I did mention before about going and volunteering at places, but Liz, is there anything you could think of education-wise that people can start to think about for opportunities that will lead to leadership skills?
Yeah, a great thing, somebody already mentioned volunteering, and that's absolutely true. A great thing would be to get involved with any of the companies that put on conferences, and be involved in a conference, be part of that team, to help put on a dinner, an awards event, to arrange interviews. You will learn and meet so many different people, and also get a lot of skills in terms of understanding how your particular role fits into your team and how that fits into the big picture. So volunteering for large efforts is a really, really great way.
Laura, I feel like this would be a good one for you as well.
Sure, yeah. So when I was an undergrad, I stuck to positions in the campus and on the university. And that was like, leading a student group that was interested in physics. But then when I got to graduate school, I realized that there's a wider world out there, and I didn't have to feel limited. And so I ran the National Space Society chapter in Florida. You can really get involved in so many things, even as a student. And I love the idea of getting involved in conferences, because then you really get to meet a lot of people. So when I was part of NSS, we actually hosted ISDC, which is the annual conference. So absolutely find those ways. And if it doesn't exist, you can create it. So if there is an organization or a club that you see elsewhere that just isn't where you are, or you have this great idea, there's nothing stopping you from creating that. And either you can start to bootstrap it, or you can ask for some kind of sponsorship. So you can really find ways to do things like on the cheap, or find some ways to get backing, so that you can really get things started if you have that inclination.
Oh, Students for Exploration and Development of Space, SEDS, is a really, really great organization. It's even in some high schools now. If your university doesn't have it, you can start a chapter.
Very good. Alice, did you have any more questions from the chat box that you wanted to ask? If not, I've got a couple other possibilities.
I think Alice has dropped off.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll go with questions I've got. So I think this one is probably, first of all, for Liz. What does the advent of commercial space stations mean for the workforce, both in space and on Earth?
Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. I'm also on the board of a company called Advancing X, which has a career astronauts program. So their mission is to train people me, you, anybody, for a career in space. And they believe that this is going to happen, that in the next decade, there are going to be jobs and people will need to be able to go to space because Tom Cruise, who does all his own stunts, wants to go to a space station for a movie, and he's going to need lighting and cameras and makeup. Can we even use makeup in space? What do you do if it's floating around, right? So people need to understand how things work in space. They need to know whether or not they are capable of working in a microgravity situation. Can they withstand launching? There's so much to learn and so much to try. And before we can do these things, we have to test all of our expected procedures and all of our expected equipment. So there's testing of the test, right? And it has to happen now. So people who enjoy writing and executing test plans, quality engineers, mission managers, logistics, human resources, lawyers, insurance, right? Insurance is one of the big hurdles anymore. So making sure that a company can achieve the necessary and maintain safety record, that their insurance costs are low enough that they can take people and do these things. There's so much to be done. And if you just think, what could I do on a commercial space station? Read on LinkedIn, for example, is where I get a lot of information. People in the space industry are posting every day. Alice, definitely. But Firefly, Axiom, the companies that are doing space today are posting daily what it is that they're doing, what their payloads are, the 20 next experiments that are going up with Axiom. A lot of them are biology experiments. That means there's researchers on Earth who need this information and are waiting to get it back. You will find the thing that interests you and you can dig into it and follow it and make a career, make a lifelong career out of it.
Very good. I want to address a couple of things I'm seeing in the chat box. So I know Laura already responded, but I'm going to verbalize it. Somebody asked about the organization she just mentioned, the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, SEDS. And there's a question about what we think about LinkedIn. So I'm glad that was brought up because I've been on LinkedIn since it first started. And I think that is really the only social media kind of thing that I do regularly. I've got other accounts, but that's the one I really go to all the time. And I actually me and my company are using that for recruiting these days. We go look for people on LinkedIn to recruit, but I also use that to keep in touch with the many people that I've met over the years, and can help each other and have somebody to reach out to when I need information. Or a lot of times an opportunity comes up and I'll remember that I talked to somebody about that and I've got their information. So I highly recommend that everybody get on LinkedIn as your professional way of connecting to everybody that you would hope to connect with. And put a good profile out there, put a resume out there, put other information about what you're interested in. All those things will help you. I think I've got over 1,000 connections. I'm sure some of you are on this panel probably even have a lot more than that, but it's really good way to connect with people.
I'd like to add to that.
Go ahead.
Say not only do I connect with young people on LinkedIn, but it's amazing how many very powerful people actually do interact on LinkedIn. And it's actually how I end up doing a lot of business now in the future. The thing I was going to say too is, it's how I met Alice Caruth is through LinkedIn. And then Ivona is a company that, sorry, my son just started crying here. I apologize. I was just going to say I'm advising a company called Ivona.com in case any of you are wondering. They're space recruiters and they're actually focused on also helping internships. So if you have a chance to go to them. And I'm so sorry, I have to go attend to my...
That's okay. I think we got to wrap up now. We're getting close to the end of the hour.
I did want to add to that. So not only is LinkedIn a really powerful site, it's probably my most favorite site for professional networking, but any other networking place where you can find professionals, Twitter is an excellent place to follow journalists, science communicators, and really any space professionals that are active on there. In fact, I think that's probably where I've grown my platform the most and gotten the most attention from the press. Reddit, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, like really anywhere where you can find other people who are interested in space, you can make those connections.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think in these days, you want to, if you're interested in something or you want to get involved in something, doing multiple social media platforms is a great thing to do. So I noticed Laura put her LinkedIn information in the chat. If we have time at the end before this cuts off, I will do that too. I'll just say verbally, it's just Joe Bullington on LinkedIn. If you want to look me up, I'll be glad to connect. So with that, we're getting close to the end of the hour, so I want to say a couple things and then let Alice, if she gets back on, yeah, there she is, say something, and then let James wrap it up for us. So I just want to say thank you. I think this has been a great panel. I'm so happy to have the other panels that we're on today. You guys bring a great breadth of different kinds of experience and ways of getting into the space business, which is rather than somebody like me who just did it pretty much the usual way. So it's been very interesting and fun to do. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alice for your wrap up.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you to all the other panelists for today. Do remember that the Pathways series continues on April the 29th, and the recording from today will be available to you. We'll put it up on the Spaceport America YouTube channel this week, and it'll be made available across social media. So do make sure you check it out. If you want to have any more questions about how to get in contact with us, do connect with the Global Spaceport Alliance. They are here as a resource for you all, and hopefully you can reach out to James and find out how you can connect to your local spaceports around the country and around the world. That's what they're here for. So I do encourage you all to think about joining the Spaceport Alliance and finding out more about different areas that you can launch out around the world. James, would you like to talk a little bit more about how they can get connected with that?
Sure. Well, thank you, Alice. Thank you, panelists. Absolutely fantastic discussion. We wanted to surprise you. I hope we did to some extent. I got into space through publishing and media and ultimately running a space event, SpaceCom. So there's a number of different ways to get into the space community, as you've heard. The biggest thing, and I think it was touched on towards the end especially, is build your contact base and nurture it and treat it very, very seriously. Okay, with that, I want to thank Spaceport America and Jacobs for their support. I want to thank all the panelists for a fantastic discussion. And as Alice mentioned, if you want additional information on GSA, please feel free to reach out to Steve or myself. www.globalspaceportalliance.com. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.